The original Nymphs and Satyr was painted by William Adolphe Bouguereau in 1873. One critic called it the greatest painting of our generation. Bouguereau was among the eminent French academic painters of the second half of the 19th century. American art collectors loved his work. In 1873, the painting caught the eye of American art collector John Wolfe, who brought it to hang in his New York mansion alongside other important French academic paintings. Wolfe's sister, the philanthropist and art collector Catherine Lorillard Wolfe, came into possession of the painting and sold it at auction in 1888 for $10,000 to renowned hotelier Edward Stokes. He displayed it in the Hoffman House Hotel. The Hoffman House was among the grandest of New York City hotels. The Nymphs and Satyr painting was said to be the painting that changed New York City. It attracted great crowds for the 13 years it hung there. In 1901, the painting was sold, disappearing from public view and placed in a storage warehouse. The buyer wanted to keep what he saw as its offensive content away from the public eye. But in 1942, the painting reappeared when Robert Sterling Clark discovered it and acquired it for the storage fee. It's now on display at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts. The Peoria version of Nymphs and Satyr was purchased by Pete Wiest in Germany in 1890 for $4,000. He brought it back to Peoria to hang in his Wiest Theater, a high-class vaudeville establishment. It was there from about 1888 to 1908 on what is now Jefferson Street. The painting was not signed by Bouguereau, but by artist L.O. Kurtz, with the word Munich beneath the signature. L.O. Kurtz may have very well been Louis Kurtz, an Austrian-born in 1833 who settled in Chicago in 1848 and began his career as a scene painter. He founded several lithography firms in Milwaukee and Chicago, including Chicago Academy of Design, which burned in the Chicago fire in 1871 and was the predecessor to the Art Institute of Chicago. Kurtz fought in the Civil War and was a friend of President Lincoln. His lithographic sketches of the Civil War were the first to be issued after the war. A newspaper ad circa 1890 reads, quote, 5 oil paintings, Nymph and Satyr, copy of Hoffman House painting will sell cheap. A. Wilsey, 824 East 84th Street. Another newspaper notice from around the same time reads, quote, at a recent sale in Chicago, a native of that city paid a stiff price for Bouguereau's Nymphs and Satyr. Shortly afterward, he was surprised to learn that Bouguereau's Nymphs and Satyr was hanging in Stokes' palatial gin mill in New York. This begs the question, how could Pete Wiest purchase a painting signed by L.O. Kurtz in Germany in 1890 when Kurtz came to the U.S. in 1848? Could Wiest have purchased the painting in Chicago thinking it was the original in order to attract the same crowds to his establishment as Stokes received with the original? Regardless, the painting made its way to Peoria and hung in Wiest's Golden Palace Theater Saloon until it closed in 1908. Pete Wiest had long been a prominent and familiar figure in sporting circles in Peoria. He was a lover of horses and automobiles and owned a number of them. He had large property holdings in Peoria at the time of his death in Los Angeles. He owned the greater part of the block of South Jefferson Street between Main and Fulton and was an investor in Peoria enterprises. He was known to be generous to a fault and a warm friend. His donations to charity were large and many. But there was another side to the man. A newspaper article from 1895 recounts that the notorious Pete Wiest completed his commuted sentence in prison. He had a pretty young wife who played the piano in the establishment. Wiest became jealous of one, first name unknown but last name as Parks, who visited the saloon frequently, and Wiest shot him. It was revealed in the trial that Wiest returned home one night after a trip of a week and found the man Parks occupying his place. Wiest was sentenced to 5 years in the penitentiary. During his time in prison, his 2 little daughters both died from neglect. One of them had been kidnapped by the mother from the prison chaplain's home and held to extort money from Wiest. Due to the influence of some of his wealthy friends, the governor allowed Wiest to be escorted from prison to attend the funerals of his young daughters in Peoria. The governor commuted Wiest's sentence from 5 years to 18 months. Although Peoria was a center for alcohol production, it had many advocates of the temperance movement, which sought to curb the production and use of alcohol. One of the most well-known members of the movement was Carrie Nation, who was known for smashing up joints with her hatchet and who was arrested on more than one occasion. However, when Carrie came to Peoria in February 1901, she left her hatchets at home. Even though she didn't damage any joints in Peoria, she was quite the attraction wherever she went. Carrie even stopped by one of Peoria's best-known establishments of the day, Pete Wiest's Golden Palace. Wiest, always the showman, actually paid Carrie Nation to make an appearance in the hopes of drawing a crowd, which he did. To further the show, when Carrie was demanding the painting to be taken down due to its inappropriate content, Wiest is reported to have made a $50 donation to her cause, but never took the painting down. After Pete Wiest retired around 1908, he stored his painting in a barn loft for several years. Later, it was moved back to the rear of the building in which it had been found, later becoming Brady's Tap, owned by Jim Brady, who took it over from Robert McCluggage. It last operated under the name of the Elbow Room. Rather than make a hole in the wall big enough to remove the painting again, a new wall was built in front of it where it would remain hidden from view for several years. In 1959, the space became a storage room for Schaefer Fur Company, and the Niagara entrance was sealed. The painting was forgotten until 1970, when Pete Wiest's old saloon building and others were razed to make way for the new addition to Illinois Bell. After rediscovery, the painting was crated up and stored at Federal Warehouse. It became the property of Pete Wiest's daughter, Maud May Wiest Sadler of Los Angeles. It was to be shipped to her, but Joe Kelly, who was past president of the Creve Coeur Club, talked Mrs. Sadler into gifting it to the Peoria Historical Society with the provision it be displayed in the Creve Coeur Club when its new building was completed. It subsequently hung in the club's Stag Bar room on the main floor beginning around 1972. When the old clubhouse was no longer in existence, the painting was moved to storage, again at Federal Warehouse, until Tom Leiter, past president of the Peoria Historical Society, requested it be loaned to him for his building where the Apollo Theater is located. It was on loan for 30 years. And on May 18, 2021, the painting was moved from Richard's Bar below the Apollo Theater and installed the next day at WTVP Studios, where it can be viewed by the public during the station's business hours.